What's going on, Washington Commanders Nation? It's your guy, Rio Robinson, and today's guest, friend of the show, my first YouTube guest, actually, fourth time appearing on the program, ESPN draft analyst Matt Miller. How we doing today, boss?
Doing well. I apologize. I just came out of like the TV garb with like the suit on, and I was like, I got to get comfortable. Look at you with the hat, the jacket. I'm sitting here in a crew neck, so I promise next time I'll have something trying to get on your level.
Hey man, it's all good. We keep it chill, we keep it casual over here anyway. And the playoffs are in full swing. We're down to championship weekend, but it's Christmas for you. It's draft season. This is what you live for. When you look at the 2024 draft class, what are the overarching themes and what's the big picture lens of this draft class?
Yeah, man. I think it's the blue chip talent at quarterback, wide receiver, offensive tackle. And that's going to dominate the top 10 picks. I mean, I feel comfortable saying that before free agency, before even all the hirings are made. I just got done recording a special with Mel Kiper Jr., and my guys got 3 quarterbacks and 3 pass catchers coming off the board in the top 6. So I think that's the theme this year is it is a weak class at the top in terms of defense. It is a very strong class at the top in terms of offense. So it's obviously going to make things pretty interesting.
Hey, that sounds like music to my ears because Washington at this current juncture is in need of a lot of things, most importantly, at the most important position of all sports. Last time I had you on the show, we were talking Sam Howell versus the 2023 draft class. Sam Howell's he looked good. He had flashes. He showed promise, but being the 5th rounder picked by the previous regime is not something that's working in his favor. It doesn't help that he parlayed 7 horrible performances to end the season. What was your evaluation of Sam Howell from what you saw in 2023?
Yeah, man, I know you remember before the season, I got a lot of hell from Commanders fans because somebody found a tweet. Remember, and they were like, he compared him to Colt McCoy. And I had to go on everybody's podcast to be like, hey, it's about accuracy, underneath ability. My grade on him coming out was round 3. He was, someone I thought was a limited player. I'm waiting for all those apologies to come through on the social media. If y'all would like to send those, it'd be cool. But, Sam started out hot, but then I think teams got the read on him. Teams got the read on scheme. The offensive line play was not good enough. But, you're in a unique position at number 2 overall. If this was a team drafting at 14 or 15, we would be having a different conversation. Rio would be like, hey, maybe there were enough flashes that if you could give a better, a left tackle, or if we can, hold on to some of those defensive, kind of foundational pieces that were traded away, maybe you're having a different conversation. But when you're picking at 2 overall, you got to weigh Sam against Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, and Drake Maye. And not to mention the possibility of Justin Fields being in the market, Russell Wilson, Kirk Cousins, all those guys, right? But really it's about Sam Howell against those quarterbacks, those 3 quarterbacks who are at the top of this year's draft class. And they're all better prospects. Like there's no other way to say it. And I've done things in Chicago where I've had to say the same thing to Bears fans. That, hey, Caleb Williams is a better prospect than Justin Fields. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. That's just how – that's the grade, right? And that's – we've seen 3 years of Justin Fields, 2 years of Sam Howell. The book is largely written on these guys, and scheme can only cover up so much. So I think, like you said, 6 interceptions your last 3 games, not where you want to be. Not where you want to be. So I think moving on is the right move.
It was always a 1-year trial situation here with Eric Bieniemy taking his shot, Sam Howell, and we already knew with the Ron Rivera situation how that was going to play itself out in 2023. Yeah. But the decision makers here are different now. The offseason wasted no time. Josh Harris got right on his high horse. I know the 49ers are a team that you fan and champion. How big of a catch is Adam Peters to the Commanders?
Man, honestly, I think he was the best candidate available this offseason as a GM candidate. Now, those guys in the past haven't all turned out to be, the Ozzie Newsomes of the NFL. But I think with Adam, especially, you're coming from a franchise that has had a ton of stability, and they've built in a lot of different ways. They've built via trade, Jimmy Garoppolo, Christian McCaffrey, Trent Williams. They've built via the draft. They've built via free agency. So it's you're not just like, okay, here's only one way that I know how to build, or I've only been a college scout. Adam has had to do a lot of different things. So I think that's why he's really uniquely positioned to run a franchise where he is going to have a lot of autonomy to make decisions. And also, I think if he's going to tap into that Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, and I know, Commanders fans, there's maybe some bad blood with the Shanahan last name and that coaching tree, but I mean, it's doing beautiful things right now. So I don't know who the head coaching hire is going to be. I mean, it could get announced while we're doing this interview for all I know, but I think you have to feel good looking at what Bobby Slowick did in Houston as the offensive coordinator. Look at what D'Amico Ryans did in Houston as the head coach with a young team. I think, seeing that Adam Peters is coming from a similar situation, you got to hope that with all the money the Commanders have, with all 3 picks in the top 40 in the draft, like there's a ton of assets to turn this thing around.
Yeah, you can see he was one of the key cogs to that machine over there. He was the heavy evaluator in that front office.
Exactly.
And to see a team take a swing as big as Trey Lance, miss and move forward and wipe their hands clean and still be a game away from the Super Bowl the same season shows you how well a roster he's built. So I'm excited about what he brings here to DC. So let's just get right to it. The quarterback class of the 2024 NFL draft. Number 1, it's very clear who's number 1, correct? There's no argument about who's the QB1 of this class, right?
No argument. It's your local guy, Caleb Williams. And I know it's going to play on the media that Chicago's got this big, huge decision to make. I don't think they do. I don't think it's that hard of a decision at all.
He's good, man. To me, there's a lot of groupthink and a lot of greatness fatigue. We do it with all the greats. Yep. LeBron's great for so long, we act like he's not. Mahomes is great for so long, we try to find ways to tear them down. Caleb Williams was tabbed as the best years ago, and he continued to be the best quarterback in the class, despite the fact that he's playing with ridiculously lesser talent than a guy like Jayden Daniels. He still goes out and put up ridiculous numbers, 120 total touchdowns in 3 years as a non-redshirt player is absurd. And all he's done is check the boxes. He paints his nails. He went to cry with his mom. He didn't show up to the presser. Why is he so polarizing when his game does not show that at all?
I don't know. Do you have any NFL players I've seen cry this season when they got hurt? I mean, I can't believe what's the phrase for this? The toxic masculinity that we put out there. I have a 10-year-old son, and my wife and daughter were going to get their nails done, and he wanted to go. Guess what? My man went to school the next day with his nails done, and they looked good, So, I'm not going to Caleb Williams' mom is an esthetician, and she wanted to practice, so she did his nails. I got no problem with a young man being close to his family at all. I think we need more of that, right? Not less of that. Oh, yeah. So I do think, like you said, there's greatness fatigue. There are people that want to be right if he fails, which is a weird place to be, of like, hey, I'm rooting for this guy to fail so that my takes can be right. I know I've told you before, I always root to be wrong. And like, if I say a guy's a 3rd rounder, I want him to play like a 1st rounder. I want him to be an all pro. You want to be wrong on that side of it. So I don't know, man, why there's, people are lining up to hate Caleb Williams, who threw 5 interceptions this year. He had 2 against Notre Dame. He threw 3 the rest of the dang year. He's fantastic. And I don't know if folks just get tired of people like me saying a player's great or what, but he is the surefire, no-nonsense number 1 player in this draft for me.
I believe so as well. And I think it's laughable that Justin Fields is in year 3 and we're not sure if he can complete routine throws yet. It's like when I see fans of ours saying we need to stick with Sam, and I see fans of the Bears saying they need to stick with Fields over something like Caleb Williams, it's laughable. Like, imagine the Texans going into last year saying, I think we got something in this Davis Mills guy. I don't know about CJ Stroud. He went to Ohio State. Like, we get very lazy with our takes around draft time. Caleb Williams is a sure thing to me as it gets. He has a pageant father, apparently, who does a lot of yapping in the media, the LeVar Ball type. And people are running around with rumors saying that he's demanding ownership in franchises.
Right, which isn't even possible. It's not even allowed. You can't do that,
It goes against the rules, right?
Right. It's wild, man. And I've not had a chance to meet his dad yet. I'm sure it will happen throughout the process. But I'll remind you, people said the same thing about Bryce Young's dad last year. They're the same thing of like, oh my God, this guy's super involved, maybe too involved, yada, yada, yada. I mean, he still won number 1 overall, right? So I will say this. there are a lot of narratives surrounding Caleb Williams that are not factual. And I don't know where they're coming from. This idea, like you said, that, rumor that he wants partial ownership in a team. That's not even possible. That goes against NFL bylaws. Or that, he's signaling he doesn't want to play in Chicago. No one has ever told me that. And I've have spoke to people who are close enough to that situation that I would know if that were the case. Now, maybe that changes, but every indication I have is that a lot is being said about Caleb Williams that is not coming from Caleb or his camp. So it's wild, the era we're living in right now, where somebody with a blue check mark can put something on social media and it's taken as truth, even if it's not. And I think there's a lot of that going on with Caleb right now.
A whole bunch of it. And I think there's a little slight envy that comes in the mix now, because NIL is legal. You can make money off your name, image, and likeness now. We're not used to seeing legal millionaire quarterbacks in college living in skyline penthouses in Los Angeles. It doesn't sit right with some people when Reggie Bush has to hand back his Heisman because things were illegal when he was there, and now Caleb can live large and be in every commercial while he's there. I think that plays a part. So would you call him generational? Is that tag appropriate for Caleb Williams?
Yeah, man. I wrote an article in October where I talked to like 15 different scouts and general managers, and they said, yeah, he's generational. And that was in October. There were still 6-7 weeks of the season left, and there were some moments where he struggled. I think the one thing, Rio, people forget, USC was not a good football team this year at all. They will not have an offensive lineman drafted. Their running back, Marshawn Lloyd, was a good player. He'll probably be a fourth-round pick. Brendan Rice, good player, probably going to be a third or fourth-round pick, right? So it's like this was not a good team. And on defense, they're awful. So I think there's this, it's USC. Like you said, this is not LSU. This is not a team where he is, surrounded by first-round picks or second-round picks. He really had to elevate this team. So, I don't know. I kind of like the idea of a guy who's had money for 2 years in college. It used to be we would evaluate players like, what's going to happen when they get money? Now we know. Now we know what's going to happen when they get money. So I'm not worried about anything off the field with Caleb. I see somebody who, you're crying in the stands after a loss. That tells me you love football and you care about the game and you care about that loss and you care about your teammates and what that means for your season and what it means for your career. So I got no issues with stuff like that.
Me either. I am someone who champions Caleb Williams. I like him so much that I'm trying to turn my attention away to let go of disappointment. There's no way Chicago doesn't pick him. But let's say Chicago is for sale, but they still want to stay in the top. Would it make sense for Washington to try to move up into that top spot to bring the DC kid?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If it's for sale and it's going to cost a lot, but going from 1 to 2 is going to cut the value down a lot. So let's say Ryan Poles, GM of the Bears, decides we're going to keep Justin Fields. Well, then you want Marvin Harrison Jr. Like that's the other prize in this draft is Marvin Harrison Jr. So if you're Chicago, you trade from 1 to 2, and then you talk to the New England Patriots at 3 and say, would you like to come to 2 to get Jayden Daniels or Drake Maye? And then I think you just work your way down the board that way and until you're to a spot where, okay, let's draft the quarterback, whether that's a pick, the wide receiver, whether that's a pick 3 or 4. So yeah, if Chicago decides to keep Justin Fields, hell yeah. You want to try to bring the local kid back home? Absolutely. It's going to be expensive, but like I said, you got those 2 second-round picks. That's going to help offset the cost a little bit. You're definitely looking at a 2025 first, but if you get a franchise quarterback, that's all that matters. So
I'm with it.
You'll pay the price.
I got 5 picks in the top 100, 6 in the top 107. I'm ready to go. If it's Caleb, I'm all wheeled up to make that trade.
Riyad, I mean to cut you off, but you got John Allen, who has said, I'm not here for another rebuild. Call the Chicago Bears, who need a defensive tackle, and say, hey, you want John Allen as well? He's not hanging out for a rebuild. And that's his right.
I drive him to Dallas.
Yep. Right. So, I mean, there's options. It's very unlikely, I think, at this point. But if Chicago decides to keep Fields, that's an attractive package that you can send that way. John Allen, a former first rounder, the number 2 overall pick, even if it's not both second round picks, at least one of those is going to help offset that cost.
I'd lose my mind because it feels like Josh Harris is big fish hunting. We land Adam Peters. It looks like almost a lock that Ben Johnson is next on his way. They're sending the full contingent of Magic, Harris, Myers, Spillman up to Detroit next week to close the deal that was announced this morning. So it feels like Ben Johnson with Adam Peters. What better way to submit the first build of your franchise as owner than to bring Caleb Williams home and finally hit with one of these local guys, because it didn't work with Haskins or Chase Young. But I think this is a different conversation. But the real conversation of the quarterback class is who is QB2? Because these debates range, because I see Drake Maye as the clear QB2 for some people. Some people don't like Drake Maye at all and think Jayden Daniels is the clear answer as number 2. Who is QB2 for you in this class?
Yeah, for me, it's Jayden Daniels, but it is close. And I hate that we get to this time of year where if you say you like one player, it means you don't like the other. I like Drake Maye, right? Right. I like Drake Maye. I'm more confident in Jayden Daniels because of the run ability, because of the deep passing ability, and he's just played a lot more football. Like, this guy's played over 50 games. I've had a lot more time to see him and study him and watch his development as opposed to Drake Maye, who's been a 2-year starter. So I just feel like there are fewer question marks with Jayden Daniels, and I'm in love with the deep ball, and his is, I think, the best in the class. You know, the numbers say it was the best in the class. So, you know, they're both good quarterbacks, and I think it will come down to, if it's Ben Johnson and Adam Peters, it's going to come down to, you know, your belief in, do you take the 21-year-old in Drake Maye, who's maybe got more quote unquote upside, or do you take somebody, Jayden Daniels, who's 23, played a lot more football, you've seen the development, but maybe he's tapped out. You know, so there are definitely questions on both sides, and those questions are going to get answered when they get around these guys at the combine, because neither is participating in an all-star game. So it'll be the combine in late February before I think we start to get some answers as to where these guys are at and how teams view them.
What is Jayden Daniels playing weight? Because I see a lot of there's a lot of I don't know, between 185 and 205, and they say he can get up to 210. The dude has no waist. He has the frame of an Instagram model. Like, he looks very slight in uniform, but he's tall. But when he gets hit, it looks different than when most quarterbacks get hit. Like, he gets tore the fuck up sometimes. Like, they throw him around the field sometimes.
Good news, in the NFL, they blow the whistle a lot faster on quarterbacks. You know, so you're okay there. I do know he weighed 205 pounds at one point in the season. Like, confirmed, he was at 205. I don't know when in the season that was, but I know he stepped on a scale and it said 205 pounds. So probably early in the season would be my guess. But you know, we ran through this with Bryce Young last year. We went through it with Lamar Jackson. We've gone through it with so many guys. Like, oh, you got to put on weight. You got to put on weight. I think how you play matters more than what you weigh while playing it. You know, he does get ragdolled a little bit. Some of that is him, you know, extra efforting. And NFL teams are going to tell him quickly, dude, stop doing this. You're not big enough to take some of these hits. You don't want, you know, Derwin James suplexing you like he did Travis Kelce. Yeah, so slide, go down, protect your body. So I think, you know, some of that is the league's going to protect you better than college football, and you got to become a smarter player at that point of you know, protecting yourself a little bit.
Why didn't it work at Arizona State?
So I think it did. That's a great question. I think it did. The numbers weren't as good, but I remember watching this dude throw as a freshman to Brandon Ayuk, thinking, shit, this is going to be a player. Like, I'm, you know, filing this name away. I do things differently now. I actually have a spreadsheet for future years. So when I see a guy, I can remember him. But, you know, I thought it did work at Arizona State. Just, you know, he was asked to play a different style of football there. And, you know, you hear stories from people, like, I have colleagues who know the family well, and they say he realized last year at this time, basically, that, you know, he was close, and that to become a first-round pick, to become a franchise quarterback, there were some things he had to work on. And you know, I've heard Brian Kelly say this. Jayden was beating him to the office most days, you know, so he put in so much more work. And I think that's just the maturity of the player. You know, you get to 21, 22 years old and you say, man, if I want to keep doing this and actually playing, I'm gonna have to change some things. I'm gonna have to work on some things. I can't just get by with my athleticism anymore. I got to become, you know, more of what my coaches want me to be as a passer. And he took off. He was always a great deep ball thrower. He learned to play from within the pocket better. He sped up his progressions. So I think, you know, a lot of people are going to want to revisit that. Why didn't it work at Arizona State? I thought it did for what he was being asked to do, but he certainly has improved a lot over the last 4 years.
So you wouldn't have any one-hit wonder pause from him, because we've seen both coins of the 1-year wonder thing. We've seen the Zach Wilsons and we've seen the Joe Burrow, two very different sides of the one great year versus a bunch of solid or lesser than years. None of that to worry about with Jayden Daniels.
I don't think so. And so was Zach Wilson. Let's remember, Zach was going to get benched. So and then last year comes around. So I think with Jayden it's different. He never had a bad year, really. I don't think so. I think great freshman year, then the weird COVID year, and then the year after that was a little hit and miss. But the 2 years he's been at LSU have been really good, and it's similar to Burrow in that way. Of that first year at LSU, you're like, hey, this looks good. And then the second year, you see that explosion, oh, okay, this takes off to the next level. So I also would say, in 2022, they were running the ball a little bit more with him at LSU. So this year, you take away 50 runs and make them passes, and those numbers do explode. Having Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. certainly helps. And, kind of the development of that offensive line, year two in the system. There's a lot of reasons, I think, for the explosion. But, going back to Zach Wilson, those first years at BYU weren't good, so that 1-year wonder was a true 1-year wonder. Whereas I think this is where you can see the progression.
Yeah, and with Jayden Daniels, you can't argue against 40 passing touchdowns to 4 interceptions, but 1,200 rush yards, double-digit touchdowns on the ground. Is this a 4.3 guy, or are we talking like high 4.4s?
I don't think we'll see him run a 40, but I would say 4.4 is probably closer to it. Usually guys with that skinny build, that long, linear build aren't necessarily burners. They're more agile and kind of shifty than they are straight line fast, but he's fast enough. And that's the thing. We've seen it in the SEC for 2 years. You're playing Alabama and Georgia. Those are NFL defenses. We've seen it, even Missouri this year. They have so many guys in that defense. They're going to be NFL players, and he had a great day against Missouri. So I would guess low 4.4, but I would be shocked if we actually see him run a 40.
Hell yeah, man! Jayden Daniels would be warranted. He would definitely warrant the 2nd overall pick in this class to you.
Yeah. I mean, he's, I think, my number 4 overall player. Because we got some really good receivers this year. But yeah, he's certainly in that mix, and most improved player in college football. I know he won the Heisman for most outstanding player, but also the most improved, and I love to see that, a guy who put in the work and acknowledges that he put in the work to become great.
Why did Drake Maye regress from his 2022 form? He went crazy. He broke a lot of Sam Howell's records there at UNC. 6'5", 230. White and wears number 10. People say Justin Herbert. What are actual comps for the guy, and why did his numbers take a dip this year? And why should fans not think he's Sam Howell just because he went to UNC?
Yeah, well, he's a lot bigger, and he has a much, I think, more mobility, stronger arm. I know Sam is proficient in both those areas. So why the regression? Josh Downs went to the NFL. They changed offensive coordinators. Those are the two biggest things. And, the guy they brought in, from Kent State, Devontae Walker, to be his number 1, didn't get cleared to play early in the season because of NCAA rules. So I think that's at least a part of it. But, Drake is a young quarterback. He has, a 2-year starter who just needs to play more football. He needs to see more defenses. I think that's a huge part of it. They threw the ball quite a bit more in 2022, if I remember correctly, like 100 times more. So that is a big part of why the numbers look differently. Mac Brown loves to run the football. Some of that's just situational football type stuff, but ball placement's got to be better. There's some hero ball to his game where he's got to stop trying to be the guy. So you could say, I think from a throwing standpoint, he's his arms on par with the Justin Herbert. It's on par with CJ Stroud in terms of body type, 6'4", 230. I think people think he's Josh Allen, though. They're like, oh, he's 6'5", 240, 245. Hey, he's big, but he's not that big. He's a good-sized quarterback, and he does use that strength well. He does use that mobility well. I think with Drake, it's more about the upside. It's not about where he is right now. And it's figuring out, okay, let's work on some of the lower body mechanics so that, your feet and your arm are matching up, and that's going to cut down on some of the ball placement issues, which, again, I'm old enough. I remember talking to Josh Allen after his sophomore year at Wyoming saying the same thing. Like the feet and the arm aren't always tied up. You got to get those together, and things are going to take off. So I think for Drake Maye, it's a similar thing.
Yep. So what is the deciding factor why you have Jayden out edging Drake Maye?
Yeah, I just think Jayden is a more outstanding football player. When you put the whole puzzle together what Jayden brings is where the NFL is right now. Deep passing, he was 22 touchdowns, 0 interceptions on passes over 20 yards. He had a QBR of 99.5 on those. You mentioned it, 1,200 rushing yards, 10 rushing touchdowns. So he's just bringing a more dynamic, ability to the field. And I think that's where the NFL is at, man, right now, whether it's you either have to be able to extend the play or make the play with your feet, and ideally both. Like maybe you don't have to be the designed runner of Lamar Jackson or Justin Fields or Josh Allen, but you got to be able to move it, at least with your feet. We've seen Mahomes do that a lot in the postseason. I think we see what Jordan Love's doing in Green Bay, and just sometimes being able to move to keep the play going is so intriguing. And with Jayden, he does a great job of moving to keep the play open, but then that speed element comes in, and he brings it as a rusher. So I think somebody who can throw deeply as well as he does, and then has that speed to just, what are safeties going to do playing this guy? Like, what are you going to do? You're going to have to hope that your middle linebacker can spy, and you're going to have to hope that your safeties can cover, because he can beat you with his arm or he can beat you with his leg. So he's a really fantastic player.
Yeah, he has next level speed. You can't teach that. That's innate. That's something you have. That's something you're born with, or something you don't have at all. But to close the book on the quarterback conversation, because I'm not interested in any quarterback outside of those three for my team. You can keep the Michael Penixes, JJ McCarthy's, and Bo Nixes of the world. But give me a floor and ceiling comp for Caleb, Jayden, and Drake.
Oh man, that's a good question. I haven't gone through like floors yet, so some of these will just be off the shooting from the hip a little bit. I think for Caleb, the ceiling is, there's some Rodgers to his game. There's some Mahomes to his game. I think young Russell Wilson might be better comp. People see Russ now and they're like, oh, he's washed. He's gotten older, he's gotten slower. But young Russ, when he was dominating, I think Caleb can be like that as a ceiling. As a floor, that is a tough question. It might be, some of the roller coaster we've seen with Trevor Lawrence, I think, is probably where we would see Caleb early in his career. So I'll go with that one.
Kyler. I've heard some say kind of like Kyler.
Yeah, I could see that too. Yeah, I could see that too. That's a good one. I think play style, they're similar, which makes sense coming out of the same scheme. For Jayden, I think my comp, I went with Lamar, just because of the running ability and the deep passing ability. It's so rare to see that. A floor for him, I don't know, like
that's really hard.
Daniel Jones, like I don't know. There aren't many guys who. It might be Justin Fields, it really might be. Justin's quite a bit bigger, obviously, but it might be just the guy. When it's there, it's there. When it's not, it's not. But I think he's a better player than Justin was coming out, just because he's better in his progressions. For Drake, I think you said it. I think the ceiling is Justin Herbert. The floor is. The floors are hard. Like I said,
floors are really hard. It's really hard to come. Yeah. I'd say like a Tannehill or something. Like I don't know.
I know. I kind of jokingly said Daniel Jones, but it might be that. It might be somebody that there are flashes, there are moments, and he is able to beat you up with his legs at times. But the hero ball can be concerning, and throwing late can be concerning, and he's just got to speed those things up. So I need to work on the floors, because I know people are going to ask me after they see this. So I got to work on that now.
Absolutely. I'm glad I'm bringing you some questions to get your draft crystal ball brain going. But let's talk about the tackle class real quick. I want to ask about the tackles and the tight ends before you have to be on your way. Washington needs help. A lot of help on the offensive side of the ball. We have $100 million in free agency, but the crux of your O-line is probably going to be built in the draft. We know Joe Alt, we know the DC kid, Olu Fashanu, and I believe Talise Fuaga is probably going to be higher than a lot of people think. Is the tackle class top heavy, or is there good depth to have in the rounds 2, 3, and 4 of the NFL draft?
It's top heavy. I think there could be good depth. A lot of it's going to, no matter what kind of run do we see on tackles late in round 1. I think you got to be hopeful that there's a run on wide receivers and at the end of round 1 instead of tackles, because that could help you guys. But you mentioned the big 3. J.C. Latham from Alabama, probably gone by round 2. Amarius Mims, Georgia, probably gone by round 2. Tyler Guyton, Oklahoma, definitely gone by round 2. So you're getting into Patrick Paul from Houston is in that. Jordan Morgan from Arizona is probably there. Graham Barton from Duke. Those are the guys that could be there, I think, in that range, realistically, could be there in that early round 2 range. So and those are good starters. Those are good players who I think we'll see some of them at the Senior Bowl, and they could definitely help their stock. But it's a good tackle class. I wouldn't be shocked if we saw 7 or 8 go in the first round. It's that good of a tackle class. So Commanders fans, you're probably either trying to trade back into round one, or you're really hoping some receivers go late round one to push those guys down.
Absolutely. And we have the draft capital to get to the bottom of the first round.
Definitely.
Again. 2 third-rounders, 2 second-rounders, 5 picks in the top 100, 6 in the top 107 of the draft. So to fans who say, but how are we going to build a line if we draft a quarterback at 2? I try to tell them the draft exists after night 1 of the NFL
It
draft.
does. Yeah, and it actually gets more fun, I think, after night 1. And, not to go too deep on this, I know we're limited on time, but, offensive guard, this is a really good round 2 guard class as well. So, if you can get a Cooper Beebe from K-State, shoot, I mean, pick 40 might be a touch early for him, but you get a really, really good player. And at pick 67, I think in round 3 is where you guys are at right now. There's going to be good offensive linemen. There's going to be good pass rushers. So it's a good year for the needs that the Commanders have.
Yep. And to close out the draft talk, because I know you got to be on your way, Washington needs a dynamic move tight end. And let's speculate and say Ben Johnson is the guy here. He needs his Sam Laporta in D.C. Generational prospect Brock Bowers is probably hearing his name called very early on night 1 of the draft. Who are some tight ends that we should have our eyes on in the draft?
Yeah, I think perfect for this scheme is Jatavian Sanders from Texas, he's my number 37 overall player. So there's a realistic, that he's there early round 2. After that, I think there's a pretty big drop off just based on what I've seen so far. Cade Stover from Ohio State is kind of that Y tight end, not a great blocker all the time. Not inline. He's a good blocker down the field. He's probably a round 4 player. Theo Johnson from Penn State, probably a round 4 player. So it is not a year where, it's like there's Brock Bowers, there's Jatavian Sanders, and then there's a pretty significant drop off. So it might be a year where can we get by with like 1 or 2 of these guys? But look what Green Bay did, with Musgrave and Croft. You can find a tight end, even in round 4, round 5 now, who can come in and be at least a situational player. And I would say this is a good year for more of the situational player than, hey, in round 3, are we getting a George Kittle somewhere? Probably not, but you can at least add to this. They got a couple young players there that you could probably add to at least.
I love JT Sanders. I would love to buy a number 0 jersey in DC to be the first number 0 in franchise history. I appreciate you for coming on. As always, your draft expertise is very much appreciated. With all the knowledge and all the tape that you crunch doing this draft analyst thing, do you ever want to dabble in a front office opportunity if it's presented to you?
I mean, you have to say yes if someone asks, right? You have to. I think we're all competitive. You want to know if you could do it on that side of things, while also understanding I'm not qualified and would feel horrible, jumping over the men and women who have grinded it out in actual front offices, driving rental cars and staying at Hampton Inns, in places like Joplin, Missouri, where I live. I'm not qualified to do that. I'm blessed to have worked in this industry a long time. I mean, I get to work at ESPN. I just got off a video of Mel Kiper Jr. I'm fortunate. I'm not trying to jump into a lane that's not mine. So I'll just root for the Adam Peters of the world and enjoy evaluating them from this side of it.
Oh yeah, but if an opportunity ever presents itself and it doesn't go well, just continue to do your draft work. Don't get exiled like my guy Mike Maye after it didn't work out for the Raiders, man.
Right. Yeah. Hopefully somewhere warm if the opportunity presents itself. LA, Miami. One of those. I'm holding out for somewhere warm if any team is ever going to try to make that happen.
Fingers crossed. If anyone's listening, man, let the folks know where they can find you, follow you, and keep up with your draft coverage as we push closer to May.
Yeah, I mean, ESPN.com. If you haven't signed up for ESPN Plus, that's where most of my work is at. And then on social media, it's at NFL Draft Scout across, I think, every platform at this point.
Hell yeah, man. You've heard the guy. Always a pleasure having my guy on the channel. Always look forward to chopping it up. That's all I got for right now. Hell to the Washington Commanders. Let's get it. Appreciate you.